My name is Laurie Paris, and welcome to She Life. My mother, Catherine Smith Gatormson, whose mother is Catherine Victoria Smith, whose mother is Nancy Smith, whose mother is Marion Mackenzie, named me Laurie Jean. I knew only two of these four women, but I carry their blood in my veins and their memories in my bones. May I speak our collective truth in a way that makes good change in a world that needs great change. The time has come for you and I to take our rightful sacred place in a culture that denies it. This is my story and journey to uncover the truth that supports my right to do just that, no matter the cost. I hope you decide you deserve that sacred place too. Episode 6, A Black Door and the White Goddess. I had almost forgotten to visit the famous Temple Church on my visit to London in 2008, the church built by the Knights Templar to serve as their English headquarters and where initiations into their order took place. It was consecrated by the Roman Catholic Church in 1185 and almost destroyed by the Germans in the Blitz, a bombing campaign during World War II. The church consists of two separate sections, a round nave, known as the Round Church, designed and built to replicate the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, and a large rectangular addition called a chancel, meaning the space around the altar. The church would eventually serve as a royal treasury under King John, with the Knights Templar acting as proto-international bankers, and then be given to another Catholic military order known as the Knights Hospitaller, after the Templars were arrested on October 13, 1307, by King Philip IV of France. The Knights Hospitaller would lease the church to the Inner Temple and the Middle Temple, two of the four legal professional associations for British judges and barristers. It was lightly raining the morning of April 27th when I arrived at Temple Church, and in the rush to add it to the agenda before leaving London for France the next day, I forgot to check the hours of operation. I was 40 minutes early, and the doors were locked. Walking around the church courtyard in the fine wet mist of London, the walkways bright black and mottled with graves, I pondered the history of the Knights Templar that had a connection to Rennes-le-chateu and the mystery I had been researching for several years. The inquisition of their order and the burning at the stake of their leader Jacques de Molay had ended the organization in France, with many Templars escaping to Britain, Spain, and Scotland. There are several ways to enter Temple Church, and I chose to wait outside the massive black door of the original Round Church until others arrived who could point me in the right direction. I settled in for the 40-minute wait and pulled out my journal to capture some thoughts. I suddenly felt a need to pray, to lay down some tobacco, and ask permission to be at this church and enter this sacred space. I felt this door, with its old steel handle and massive keyhole that I wrote in my journal was large enough to pass a cell phone through, was the door I should enter. I also wrote, I may not be able to enter by this door, but things aren't always as they should be. I would be the only one to stand at this entrance. My traveling companion would join the others who eventually lined up in front of another door across the way that was obviously the one generally used. As I watched the line grow longer, my friend periodically glancing at me, I started to think I was being silly and decided it best to join her and the others. As I began to turn away from the big black door to join them, I was instantly stopped from doing so by an invisible force that attached itself to my crotch and would not allow me to leave. On June 28, 1914, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the heir apparent to the Austro-Hungarian throne, was assassinated along with his wife Sophie by a Bosnian Serb student named Gavrilo Princip. Princip shot both the Archduke and his wife at close range as they drove through Sarajevo en route to the residence of the provincial governor. Sophie died instantly, her husband 10 minutes later. The assassination of Franz Ferdinand was a key factor that led to World War I. The Archduke was a Habsburg, a family that held one of the principal sovereign dynasties of the world. Author John Keegan writes on the first page of his national best-selling book titled The First World War that the First World War was a tragic and unnecessary conflict. Unnecessary because the train of events that led to its outbreak might have been broken at any point during the 5 weeks of crisis that preceded the first clash of arms had prudence or goodwill found a voice. Keegan speaks to the ugliness of World War I, saying, "The chronicle of its battles provides the dreariest literature in military history. No brave trumpets sound in memory for the drab millions who plotted to death on the featureless plains of Picardy and Poland. No litanies are sung for the leaders who coaxed them to slaughter. The graveyards remain. Many of those who died in battle could never be laid to rest. Their bodies had been blown to pieces by shell fire, and the fragments scattered beyond recognition. Many other bodies could not be recovered during the fighting and were then lost to view, entombed in crumbled shell holes or collapsed trenches, or decomposing into the broken battle soil left behind. World War I saw 10 million people killed. These soldiers fought in trenches, battling their enemies that also included rats and lice that shared these trenches and consistently tormented them. The lice caused trench fever that contributed to muscle pain, fever, and consistent headaches, while rats, fed on human waste from both armies, spread disease and death among the troops. The dampness of the trenches led to trench foot and often led to gangrene and then amputation of the foot. According to the Canadian War Museum website, trench life involved long periods of boredom mixed with brief periods of terror. The threat of death kept soldiers constantly on edge, while poor living conditions and a lack of sleep wore away at their health and stamina. Life in the trenches was horrendous, and if that wasn't enough, there was death by gas, the most common being mustard that would drift over the battlefields into these man-made ditches. Robert Graves, an Englishman who wrote poetry like his father, sat in one of these trenches, fighting to stay alive, and would eventually write a book published in 1948 called The White Goddess, a historical grammar of poetic myth. Graves would survive this bloody war. His wounded body would eventually recover, but his soul maimed for life by what he had seen and endured. He would experience the terror of chemical warfare not seen to this degree before, demoralizing weaponized chemicals that caused 90,000 deaths and 1.3 million casualties. Captain Graves would admit, since 1916, the fear of gas obsessed me. Any unusual smell, even a sudden strong scent of flowers in a garden, was enough to send me trembling, and I couldn't face the sound of heavy shelling now. The noise of a car backfiring would send me flat on my face or running for cover. He would fight on the front lines of France until wounded, and then spend the rest of the war in England, continuing to write poems about his experience of frontline combat. His first book of poetry, Over the Brazier, was published in 1916, and for many years he carried the moniker of war poet. Some men find God in war. I believe Graves found the goddess and actively pursued her and came to believe, as I, that she had been usurped of her sacred role through what he called iconotropic redaction of original myth, and that the male-dominated religions eventually exterminated the worship of the goddess. Iconotropic redaction refers to the process of changing the interpretation of icons and myths of earlier religions in such a way to confirm the ideas of people wanting their new religions and new gods to be worshipped. Graves believed this was consistently done and led to the destruction of the goddess religion, and in that destruction, it caused most of the problems seen in our world today. In 1944, Graves wrote a book he called The Roebuck in the Thicket, changing it to The Threefold Muse, only to be changed again when published to The White Goddess. In his book, Graves explores the original myth of the goddess of birth, love, and death, with its original book cover displaying a triple goddess, his threefold muse, with three geese in flight above their heads. A star or pentagram sits above the head of a man bowing to them, a man identified by Graves as the son of this trinity of goddesses, whose symbols include, among others, the serpent, lion, and eagle. For many years, Graves lived on the island of Majorca in Spain, where he wrote the foreword of this book that revealed his belief that the goddess has not been given her due and that her religion should be honored, especially by poets. He writes, "The function of poetry is religious invocation of the muse. Its use is the experience of mixed exaltation and horror that her presence excites. This was once a warning to man that he must keep in harmony with the family of living creatures among which he was born, by obedience to the wishes of the lady of the house. It is now a reminder that he has disregarded the warning, turned the house upside down by capricious experiments in philosophy, science, and industry, and brought ruin on himself and his family. Nowadays is a civilization in which the prime emblems of poetry are dishonored, in which serpent, lion, and eagle belong to the circus tent, ox, salmon, and boar to the cannery, racehorse and greyhound to the betting ring, and the sacred grove to the sawmill, in which the moon is despised as a burned-out satellite of the earth, and women reckoned as auxiliary state personnel, in which money will buy almost anything but truth, and almost anyone but the truth-possessed poet." Graves died on December 7th, 1985, having witnessed this book find new life in 1970 when a growing feminist movement used it to support a burgeoning matriarchal religious movement. A ferry ride away from where Graves lived on the island of Majorca lived another truth-possessed poet named José Terras. Terras was 19 years old when The White Goddess was published and was part of a secret society in Girona that protected a relic and rituals that could call the goddess back to earth. After many years of keeping the purpose of this society hidden, Terras would entrust the secrets of the society to a woman named Patrice Chaplin, fearing the rituals would be lost to the world and unable to accomplish a very important task. Terras revealed to Chaplin that he needed to open the path for the Messiah. Terras was a Scottish Rite Freemason and a defender of his people against Franco and fascism when he fell in love with Patricia Johns, now known as Patrice Chaplin. Chaplin and her friend Beryl hitchhiked to Spain when they were 15 and arrived in Girona, an ancient city with gentle winters and hot, humid summers. Girona is located 99 kilometers from Barcelona and only a 3-hour drive to Rennes-le-chateu. Chaplin says she knew the day she walked over the bridge in Girona, built by Gustave Eiffel, that her life would never be the same, and gives us a vivid description of she and her friend Beryl arriving in town. Beryl and I were bohemians and wore rope Roman sandals that you could buy at London's Charing Cross Road for 3 and 6 pence, and very tight black drainpipe trousers. Our black sleeveless tops were lopsided, handmade, falling apart. Our nails were painted black, and we wore beautifully applied white lipstick. She goes on to say that the townsfolk of Girona had never seen anything like it, throwing small stones at them along with prickly burrs that stuck to their hair. They were not welcome in Girona. She would meet Terrace and his friend Luis, who spoke fluent English, in an alley beside the Cal Ross restaurant, and from that day, Terrace would protect her and love her as he did his people until he passed away on April 19th, 2021. Chaplin is a prolific writer, author, activist, and playwright who also describes herself as a medium and clairvoyant. To say her life has been adventurous is an understatement. She married into Hollywood royalty in the 1960s, acted for Jean Cocteau, was acquainted with Salvador Dali and Umberto Eco, and has written over 30 books, with several being made into movies. Chaplin has seriously studied the Kabbalah and proven without a doubt that there is a strong connection between the city of Girona and the mystery of Rennes-le-chateu. Chaplin's book, City of Secrets, was written at the request of a man she loved, the poet Thérèse, who, after suffering a heart attack and realizing his mortality, reached out to her to share the secrets of his society that he felt was under threat. Secrets, he said, that would bring the planet into unforeseeable darkness if they ever fell into the wrong hands. After an initial meeting with Thérèse in the fall of 2004, Chaplin began the research for her book to go along with the information she received from Thérèse, and discovers over 86 pieces of evidence, including maps, documents, photographs, and over 100 letters written by a French woman who had been taken to Girona from France when she was 16 to live in a house on the property near the Catholic Church. Chaplin reveals in her book that the priest of Rennes-le-chateu, Béranger Saunière, was visiting Girona on a regular basis to visit this French woman, and presents information revealing a ritual that was being performed to call upon the spirit of a holy woman to manifest on earth. A ritual that could cause death if the participant was not spiritually prepared to participate. Chaplin says in an interview with Andrew Goff on May 7th, 2007, that she believed that the priest Saunière's brother Alfred died in this manner. Chaplin also discovers documents with references to the religion of Isis in a note with the word Sion written upon it. The word designates the names of the children of Geb and Nut, the god and goddess of the earth and the sky, Seth, Isis, Osiris, and Nephthys. Isis, the goddess of 1,000 names, had a brother Seth, who was the god of disorder, violence, foreigners, storms, and most important to our story, the god of the desert in Egyptian religion. He was the god who murdered Osiris and cut him into 14 pieces so that he was unable to resurrect himself. Jan Assmann, a German Egyptologist, has said that Seth, the desert god, who was worshipped on his own, represented a manifestation of evil. I would meet this desert god, who I referred to as the devil in a dream, in the early morning as I lay sleeping in a motel room in Carcassonne, just hours before I was to visit the church of Rennes-le-chateu. He would warn me that if I told the story of the crucified woman I found in his desert, he would seek revenge. A god who murdered his brother and sodomized his nephew would certainly be considered a manifestation of evil, as Assmann states, and very capable of revenge towards me. Also included in Chaplin's interview with Goff in 2007, she gives details of a chocolate advertisement in an alley in Girona and explains to him that the significance is lost in her book because her publishers would not allow her to add what was necessary for clarity. Chaplin would visit the church of Rennes-le-chateu in the early 1960s, long before Rennes-le-chateu became a worldwide phenomenon, with Thérèse and a doctor named Arbos, while on a mission to gather any incriminating evidence left in a house in Quillon, where the French woman once lived. Quillon is located only 15 kilometers from Rennes-le-chateu, and it is suggested by Dr. Arbos that they stop at the church on the way back to Girona to take a look around, And while in the church, Chaplin would encounter a force she describes as coming from the realm of darkness. She writes, I sensed it was a treacherous yet beautiful church, somehow on the edge of something that was not safe or even divine. And then I saw it, the thing that could not be here, not even in a nightmare, not even in the last mad, hellish thought. In front of the Stations of the Cross was a dark, hunched being in priest's robes, his eyes like swords swung into mine, jet black, filled with power built up from hundreds of years of unimaginable existence. And behind him, coming out of the dust and dark, was a picture. And for a moment, it looked like the old poster in the alley. In a rich and deep tone, he had spoken the words, only from a gold cup. The old poster in the alley Chaplin is referring to is the chocolate poster with the image of Emma Calvé on it. Chaplin would run screaming from the church and choose not to share what she had seen with Thérèse, as she knew she would not be believed. On page 319 of City of Secrets, Paris calls the holy woman that can be called to earth the Lady of the Cup and says, she can on occasion come back to this earth. The ritual can bring her to heal, to save, to empower. Just outside the Royal Courts of Justice in London stands a landmark pedestal with the image of Queen Victoria sculpted within it, and on its crown, a sculpture of a dragon. This dragon was created by sculptor Charles Bell Birch in 1880, with the dragon designed to look like it is about to swoop down on anyone passing by. The stone sculpture marks the gateway into the city, reminding all who enter the importance of this symbol in the history of the nation of Britain and the city of London itself. Dragons are significant characters in English folklore and carry the symbolic role of guarding treasure, including the many treasures of the Knights Templar, whose effigies lay inside the nave of Temple Church that I had waited 40 minutes to enter. I was now standing in front of the big black doors of their church, my body held firmly in place by an invisible force attached to my crotch that stopped me from walking over to join the other visitors at the regular entrance. Frozen in place and unaware of what would transpire next, the black door began to slowly open, with a man of small stature appearing from behind it. He looked at me briefly and calmly said, "Please come in." At once, the invisible force let go of me, and I walked through the door. A UK travel page called Cultural Wednesdays reports that the effigies of the 9 knights that lie on the floor of the round church have their eyes open and are all depicted as being in their early 30s, the age of Christ when he died. The page says they are not memorials, but rather a reminder that the knights are ready to spring into action when Christ rises again. The pillow stones under their heads are mentioned in the Bible in chapter 28, verse 12 of the book of Genesis, that describes Jacob dreaming of angels ascending and descending a ladder to heaven after using a pillow stone to sleep on. According to the Bible, Jacob rose up early in the morning and took the stone that he had put under his head and set it up for a pillar and poured oil upon the top of it. And he called the name of that place Bethel, which means the house of God. This pillow stone would also be called the Bethel stone and considered one of 2 sacred stones, the other being the gravestone of Jacob's favorite wife, Rachel. These 2 stones have become linked to the Holy Grail, or what I have come to believe, to a holy girl that still walks among us.